Hello there everyone. Today I'm going to show you how you can do a prong set cabochon, and it can look a little something like this. So this is just the one that I'm going to be showing you how to do. So a nice teardrop shaped cabochon in this case, just a black one, and you got your prongs all the way around there holding it nice and securely, and then I made a bail, and then I just made the back like this, so a bit of a feature as well. So you can either keep it simple or make a bit of a design on the back as well. It's completely up to you. And it's nicely in there and secure, it's not going to come out at all because the prongs hold it nicely in place. So you can use this technique for many different shapes and sizes of cabochons. I'm just going to show you how to do it on the teardrop one, but it'll work for other sizes and shapes as well. So if you want to learn how to do this, then keep watching. So these are the things that we'll need. Now I have two gauges of wire here. They're both regular round wire, and I'm just using a silver coated wire to match my black stone. The first gauge I have here is a 0.8mm. We're going to use this for the structure, so it's the base wire, and then also to make the actual prongs. The other wire that I have here is a 0.4mm. We're going to use this to wrap around and help keep it all together. Then also do the bail with this, wrap the bail. And then the final thing I have is the actual stone that I'm going to be setting. This is just a teardrop shape, a black agate. So this is just what I'm going to be demonstrating with. But you can use this technique in the prongs for many different types, shapes and sizes of stones and cabochons that you have. I'm just going to be demonstrating with this one. So let's get it all together and let's get started. So then the first thing we need to do is find the circumference of the cabochon that we're working with. And then I also have just a regular piece of paper here that I'm just going to be working on to begin with, because we also need to figure out where we need to place our prongs as we're going to be making them. So to measure the circumference of my stone, I usually just take a piece of scrap cord and then place it all the way around from the very tip there, and then get it around the stone and then to meet back up. And then I know that's the full circumference, and then I'm going to get out my ruler and then measure this, how long it is. And this one happens to be 10 centimeters, so pretty spot on there. So what I need to do is use my ruler and then get a pencil as well, and on the piece of paper we just need to draw a line with that circumference, in my case the 10 centimeters. So I'm going to draw that, a straight line, because this is how we're going to create our prongs. So like that, got my 10 centimeters there. And then what I'm also just going to do is find the midpoint for this line, just as a bit of a guide. And obviously this is 10 centimeters, so it's going to be fairly easy. That's 5 centimeters I need to mark off. So just like that, just a little mark just like that, because this is only for reference to place our prongs. We're going to cross this out again or rub it out later on. And then now what we need to do is figure out where we want to place our prongs. Now you can do this in a few different ways. You can either just work it out mathematically, so say from the center point, and then measure out how far you want in between. But obviously what I like to do as well is reference against the stone, because this is a straight line that we're working with. It can be a little bit hard to imagine how that's going to look on the stone. So say if you have an oval as well, you want to place them as evenly as possible. So what I like to do is just on the side of it here, just take my stone and draw all the way around it, just to help give a guideline. So like this. And then what I can do with this is just have a look at it, because this is the shape of my stone now. I can have a look here and then basically place in where I want my prongs to sit. So on the bottom here, I can do it right around there. Try and get it even on both sides. And you can always spend a bit of time doing this. And what you just want to make sure of when you place your prongs is that this counts for any shape that you're doing, any shape of cabochon that you're working with. You always just need to make sure you put them in key points that's going to hold the cabochon in place. So always, if you look then from this is the bottom of it. So if we look at it from this angle, we need to make sure we go below the widest point. So it's going to hug the bottom of it basically, because the widest point is up here. So almost a bit in the corner, you could say. Obviously it doesn't have obvious corners. And the same if you were to look at it from the other angle. Now this is a teardrop, but the same if you had an oval as well. You want to make sure you go just a bit below the widest point. So it's going to basically cup it in and hold it in place. So I'm going to place my first 2 prongs around here, and then on the top I want them placed roughly there. Like I said, this is completely up to you where you want yours placed. This is just kind of the way that I like to do it. So something like that. And then I'm going to get my piece of scrap card out again, because we're working with curves now, not a straight line. And I just want to get a rough idea of the distance from one prong to the other. So I'll just start with the 2 bottom ones here. So just gently put your cord in between the 2 in that curve, following the line of the cabochon. And then what I just also like to do as well, because if you look on your cabochon, what we've done is drawn the circumference around it. But compared to where, because we're building, like, going to build a frame where the prongs are going to come out from, that frame is going to sit just behind, but just within the circumference. So that means we just have to take a little bit off our measurements. So take off about a couple of millimeters as well. So I know from one prong to the next is there, and then I'm just going to make it just about 1 or 2 millimeters shorter than that. So I'm going to go over to my straight line again then, because this is to help get them placed centrally and nice and evenly all the way around. And then I'm just going to measure this length first. So from 0, and then this is actually 2 centimeters. So I know that that is 2 centimeters from the 2 bottom prongs there, the ones that are going to sit on the very bottom and hold the stone in place from there. And that very bottom of the cabochon is the midpoint that I measured on the straight line. So remembering that, it's 2 centimeters, so that's easy enough. That means I have to do 1 centimeter on each side of this midpoint. So it's easy enough if you try and keep it to obviously even numbers, otherwise you can just work it out what half would be. So I now have 1 centimeter on each side of the very midpoint on the straight line there. So those are going to be the placement of my very first prongs. And then to measure the distance for the other 2 prongs as well, I'm going to go back to my drawing there of the actual shape of the cabochon and do the exact same thing basically. So measure from one of the bottom prongs up the side of it to the very next one, and following that curve that you have when you're drawing the cabochon. And again, I'm just going to take off about 2 millimeters or so, because to make sure that the frame of the piece is going to be within the size of the cabochon, just like I just explained. So take this again, do the exact same thing, measure the length of this, and this again happens to be 2 centimeters, so that's quite handy. But remember, it can be different for yours, and it probably will be. It'll be different for different sizes and shapes. So I'm going to measure from where one of the prongs is, go further out to one side, 2 centimeters in my case. Do the same thing on the other side as well. So the prong from the other side, and go 2 centimeters out from there. So this is just how I like to kind of figure out where to put my prongs, to try and make it as easy as possible instead of too much math really, because I don't really do that well with math. And then also get it as nice and even as possible to get a final look on whatever cabochon that you're using. So this is now the guideline that we're going to use to be able to make our prongs to begin with. And like I said, we can just rub out the very center point that we marked up. That's the very first one now. It's made just so we don't get confused with it and maybe think we need to put prong there, because we only need the 4 in this case anyway. You can obviously make more prongs if you want to, but in most cases 4 will be sufficient. So I've now gotten rid of that midpoint, and I know I've got these 4 points as I'm going along and making my prongs that I need to place the prongs in. So then now what we have to do is just cut 2 lengths of a 0.8mm wire, and what I have is cut them different lengths. I've just done one that's a bit shorter, that's this one. This I've just done 25 centimeters, because that's the one that's going to run along the inside, and I'll get to explaining that in a bit. And then I've done one that's a bit longer, and this is just 30 centimeters long. Now the longer one is the one we're going to use to make the prongs with to begin with, Because the reason I then made it longer is because you've got to remember each prong as we're making it is going to take up a bit of wire. So I just made this a little bit longer. And also these measurements are just in relation to the cabochon that I'm using. You might want to use longer or shorter lengths depending on the shape and the size of yours. So then what we need to do first is make the section here with the prongs. And what I'm going to take out is that longer piece of wire that I cut off. So I'm going to take this, and we need to just make sure there's no kinks or bends in it. First of all, so just run it through your hands for a bit, but then also try and get it as straight as possible, because this is a straight line and we just want to try and follow that to begin with. So get it nice and straight, and then to start making this section, what I personally like to use as well is a flat nose plier here, and that's the one that's got a wide tip but it's flat all the way. You can use chain nose pliers, that's fine. The reason that I like using these is that when you're making your prongs, because obviously you got to think about the length of your prongs as well, the size of them. First of all, you got to decide that compared to your stone, because some stones are thicker and some stones are not as thick. If they're not that thick, you can use smaller prongs. If they're thicker, you might need to use longer ones. That's kind of a judgment call depending on the stone that you're using. But what I like to do, at least so I know it's going to fit this stone, is make basically the prong the length of my plier here. Now obviously if you need them to be longer, you might not be able to do that. But so what I'm going to do is place this down and just use the very tip of my plier as a guide, so that way I also make sure that all the prongs become even and exactly the same. Now what you can do, if you don't have that or you can't find the right size plier, you can also go over this drawing that you've made, reference with the measurements for each prong, and just measure it out first. So say if you want your prong to be 1 centimeter long, you can just go over with your ruler first and mark off the length like that all the way for every prong. So that's a way to do it as well, and that way you can then do it, say, with chain nose pliers, because you know that you need to grab it right where you've marked it off. But that's completely up to you. I'm just going to be using these pliers as I find that a bit easier. So then what we need to do to start making the prongs here, we need to start towards the middle of our wire. So not all the way to one end, but towards the middle. Remember, not all the way in the middle either, because every time we make a prong, it's going to take up a bit of wire. So just so you have a decent length left on this side, I'm going to start from here and work my way across. Because I'm also going to be using these to, say, make the bail and then the back as well. So you just want to have enough to do that. So I'm going to place my wire down here and keep working against my sketch and against my measurements there. Like I said, try and make sure you get as straight a line with your wire as possible. We're also going to be doing that throughout. So just where you're working, make it as straight as possible. And then what I'm going to do is place my pliers right before that very first dot that I made on marking. Pick them up, and then I'm going to bend my wire against my pliers, so the long tail is what we're making the prongs with, just like that, straight up, so you get a nice sharp angle in there, a 90-degree one, because we need the prongs to be coming straight up, so like that. And then to make the very first prong, what I then do is take the very tip of these pliers, place them against that angle that we just made till they won't go down any further, and it looks like this. And then, like I said, I'm going to use the actual pliers themselves to make my prong. So just make sure your wire's sitting nicely in there, and I'm going to have them all the way towards the tip. That's just the measurement that I'm going to be working with. And then that's the long tail that we're working with to make the prongs. Bend that towards the opposite direction of where you have the other tail, and you want to come all the way back in itself. Come all the way around the plier like that and point down instead of up. And then when we take the pliers out, we have this. So it's the beginning of our prong here. What we need to do now is just tighten this up because it's a bit too open. To do that, what I'm going to do is place this whole thing, the prong, into my pliers, and I like working towards the back end of my pliers there. It gives a bit more control. And then just gently start squeezing. Just nice and gentle. Try and do it in small movements rather than just one big push. Because what can happen as well as you're squeezing these together is that it can twist on you, the wires, because obviously they're lying side by side and you try and squeeze them together. So to try and avoid that happening, just take it nice and steady. And that's why I like doing it at the back of my pliers as well, it gives more control. But if they do twist on you, just grab onto them and twist them back. So it's not a big deal if they do twist, but just try and avoid it if you can. Then there we have the very first prong. And then what I like to do, because now we need the long end to come straight out again to be able to make that straight line to match with the sketch. What I do is place my pliers back on, and I'm not squeezing tight, I'm literally just holding the wire gently, because otherwise you'll make the wires cross over each other. And then bending the long tail against my pliers again. So there we go, there we have the very first prong, and then the wires are still coming out in a straight line. Now this works in this case. What you might not be able to do that where you hold around the prong like this. If you can't, what you can do is just open up the prong a little bit and get some chain nose pliers right at the base, but then just be aware to try and make sure you get the bend in exactly the same spot. So you don't want the angle on this side to be, say, further down than the other side, or further up as well. So just try and get them in even as possible to get that nice straight line. So this is the very first prong. So now I'm just going to continue like this, making the other ones as well. So place this back down for referencing on your paper. The measurements that you made, make sure that the tail here that you're working with is nice and straight to the next point where you're going to make your prong. So lay this prong over the first mark, and then for the next one, place your pliers in again just before the next mark, like that. Because obviously the actual prong takes up a little bit more space than the marks themselves. So like that, and do the whole thing again. Bend your wire against your pliers to get a nice sharp angle. And place them back in so they won't go down any further against the angle there. And then bend your long tail all the way around your plier back on itself. Come back down, straight down like this, and then start squeezing this nice and tight, gently, until it's as tight as you want it. If you can still see a bit of a gap, then I'm going to squeeze a bit more. So just like that. Place my pliers in it again, to make sure it's nice and flat. Just gently holding on, and then bending my wire again against my pliers. I find that to be the best way to get nice sharp angles. So there we go, that's the next prong. So we now have two, and then time to move on to do the next one. You just want to continue doing this all the way across. In my case I have the 4 prongs, so I'm going to keep doing this till I've made all 4 prongs. So I've now made all my 4 prongs there, and as you can see they fit nicely with the little sketch that I made, so the measurements are nice so far and correct. So now what we need to do is start actually making the frame of the piece as well, so make the whole prongs section here a little bit stronger. So I'm done with my measurements and my sketches, because what we need to do is move on to bringing the other base wire into it as well now. So the other length that you cut off with the 0.8mm, so the shorter one in my case. So again, I'm just going to make sure there's no kinks or bends in it, and also straighten it out as much as possible. Because then what we need to do now is bring these two together, straight below each other. So this length here, the shorter length, is going to lie right beneath the other one, and then what we're going to do is use a 0.4mm wire to wrap these two together. So I've then got my 0.4mm wire here ready to wrap with, and I've just left it on the reel just because it's hard to know how much you need, and also just so you don't run out. So I'd rather just leave it on the reel. If you're more comfortable, you can obviously cut it off. Just make sure you have a decent length of maybe 1.5 meters to 2 meters, because I also want to try and use this to create the bail, and ideally I prefer to try and use continuous lengths as far as I can. So I'm just going to leave it on the reel in my case. Straighten this out as much as possible so we can bring the two together, and then I'm going to pick them up and then put the section, the wire with the prongs on, is going to be on top, and then I'm going to start on one end here And then all we need to do really is take this 0.4mm wire. I also like to leave a fairly substantial tail before I start wrapping, just because I'm probably going to use that at the end to either finish something off or use it to the back sections as well. So I'm just going to start here before one of the prongs. So start wrapping here and then work my way all the way across. And then all you need to do is basically wrap around both wires together. And the most important part is just to make sure that they stay flat throughout. So lying next to each other like that. And then just basically keep wrapping. Now the beginning wraps here are just going to be the most difficult because obviously everything is still loose. But just keep wrapping, making sure that every time you do a wrap it's nice and close to the previous one. So you get a nice neat look. And then what you can always do is squeeze them together as well, either with your nails or you can take some pliers and squeeze your wraps together so it gets nice and tight. And then you just want to keep wrapping like this. Like I said, make sure your two base wires are lying flat next to each other so they don't end up crossing over. And keep wrapping like this all the way till you reach your very first prong. I'm just going to show you what to do then, because obviously the prong is going to be in the way to continue wrapping in the same way. So keep wrapping right up against your prong there. And then what I do is instead of wrap around both of them, to get to the other side of the prong, I just wrap in between the two base wires. So like this, I go in between them and basically just wrap just below the prong, because what you can see is you have a tiny little space there. So I'm just going to wrap a couple of times in that little space around just the bottom wire here without the prongs on, until I reach the other side of the prong comfortably. So that's usually in my case about 3 or 4 wraps. So like that. Have a look at it. See how it sits. Can do just one more. In my case here we're doing 4 on the single wire alone, because that's going to be right below the prong then. So now I'm just going to continue wrapping around both because I'm on the other side of the prong now. So back to just wrapping around both of them together. And again, still making sure all the wraps are nice and tight. Just like this. And now I'm on the other side of the prong. And that's nice and secure. And the whole piece is a little bit easier to wrap now as well, because your wires don't move as much, but it'll get even easier the further you get along. So you just want to keep wrapping like this all the way along, past every single prong until you reach the other side, and just wrap a little bit up the sides on each side of the last prongs there. Not too far, because then we need to start shaping this and find out how it fits nicely with the cabochon. So I've now wrapped across all 4 prongs there and have a little section of wraps as well, just on each side. So now what we need to do is start shaping this into the cabochon shape, so obviously it can fit and hold on to it. So what I'm going to do is just flip this over, because what we need to do is shape it but with the prongs facing outward. So just gently start. I like to start from the middle and just gently start putting curves into it. So just start and then move a bit across. And just take your time, and what you want to make sure to do as well is, as you're shaping it, that it stays nice and flat, so the prongs are sticking out towards the side, rather than say you start like this and then start shaping it. I'm doing this all the way around and gradually getting into the shape. Now in my case I'm using the teardrop cabochon, so I need it in the teardrop shape. So what I'm going to start doing as well is bring the cabochon into it, so I can keep referring back to that. Make sure I get it the right size and shape to fit just within the circumference of the cabochon itself. It's just nice and gentle, take your time, make sure the whole thing stays flat, and you can just measure against it, see what the bottom is like for now. The bottom looks pretty good to me, so now we just knead up the sides there. And the top wires here, just cross them over each other for now, and we'll deal with them once we have the shape in place. Same on the other side. Slowly getting that teardrop shape now. almost there. We just need to make the sides a bit tighter as well. Again. So just take your time doing this until you get the shape and size just right for your cabochon. And obviously this whole thing still looks nice and neat and even all the way around. So you have this nice framework on the back and then the prongs sticking out towards the side. So something a bit like this. Now we're almost there. So just keep doing this until you're happy. So I've now kept shaping it until I've reached the shape that I want it to have. So it fits nicely with my cabochon there. As you can see, it fits just within the circumference because that's what we want to do. So this back frame is also going to help support the cabochon on the back there, but so you can't really see it on the front. So you can basically just, the cabochon just covers it when you look from the front. So that's just how I want it to be. So now what we need to do is start sorting out the wires on top here. Now you can obviously see I still have a bit of ways to wrap before those wires meet up. So this is why it's best to leave this wrapping, because you don't want to end up wrapping too much and then shape it, and you've ended up wrapping too much and have to undo some. So it's better wrapping too little. So I'm just going to continue my wraps for a little bit on both sides. I'm not going to go all the way up because what we need to do is split the wires up. So I'm going to go up to about halfway there on each side of the bare wires that I have left now, because then I'm going to show you what we're going to do, because we're going to use some of the wires here, base wires, for the bail, but some of them are going to go straight down to instantly help form the back part. So I'm just going to keep wrapping for a little bit. So I've now wrapped a bit further up on both sides here, and then again still not wrapping all the way up to where my base wires cross. The reason for that, like I said, is because we're going to be splitting up the wires now. So what you just want to do first is decide what you want to use as the front and the back. Both sides should be pretty much the same, but just in case one side is, say, you have a little bit of untidy wraps on one side that you can see but not on the other side, you can always choose which one you want to be the one you can actually see. So what we need to do now is split the wires. So I'm going to get my chain nose pliers in this case, and I'm just going to start with one side here. We need to just open them up first to be able to get our pliers in, and then I'm leaving the top one. What I'm doing is the bottom one that's furthest towards the inside, the middle of the piece here, I'm going to grab that all the way down to where my wraps are finished and just get all the way in there and then bend it straight down, just like that. So there we go. So go straight down like that, and then we need to do the same with the other side. So I just need to bring those to the front. There we go. Open up the wires so you can get your pliers in there. Take the bottom one again, and just get right down to where your wraps are finished, and then bend that also just straight down. Just have a prong in the way there. Straight down just like the other one. So they're coming straight down towards the bottom of your piece here. Try and get them as even as possible. So there we go. We can always adjust these later on, so don't worry too much about them. Just make sure they're bent straight down. So now this is going to be my back, the whole back of my piece, because these are faced towards the back. So you need to make sure you bend them towards the same side there. So now what we need to do is always just double check that you've still got the right size and shape. Mine opened up a little bit, so I'm just going to close it back up just nice and gently until it's just right again. So there we go. So now what I'm going to do is again do one side at a time. We need to continue wrapping up these. Now we only have single wires going upwards, so we just need to continue wrapping on those all the way up to the point where they meet up pretty much. So just do one side at a time. Start wrapping around that individual wire. Just simple coils all the way around. Get them nice and tight as well, so it blends in nicely. Do this a little bit further up until they pretty much meet, and do that on both sides as well. And then we'll reach the point where we're going to start focusing on making the bail. So I've now wrapped further up on both sides there to the point where the wire's almost crossed over. So what we need to do now, and still just make sure that it still fits your cabochon, so you don't end up wrapping too much or too far, something like this. So what we need to do now is bend these bare wires now in the shape so we can start making the bail. Again, I'm going to take my chain nose pliers for that, and then just do one wire at a time. So I'll just start with my furthest back one, it's easy to get to, and then just right where my weave, or my wraps rather, end, I'm going to grab it on there and then just bend it upward, and then a bit towards the side so it comes back out at an angle like that. And the same with the one on the other side. Grab it right where your wrapping ends, and then bend it upwards and a bit towards the opposite side. So you have something that looks like this. So from the other side here, which is the front in my case, it's going to look like this. So we're going to have a nice beginning shape for the bail. You can just correct these until you're nice and happy with it. So they're quite even and they come out at pretty much the same angle. Because what I like to do is have a bit of a feature of the bail as well, so make it a bit of an angle. So I'm going to have it graduating outwards first and then get to the widest point and then graduate back inwards again. So I've now got this, and then what we need to do now is start wrapping, continue wrapping here with the wire that we've been wrapping with the whole time, but then actually make it into the bail. So this is kind of the framework. So now we're going to be moving straight into the bail. And in my case, I've still got my wire attached here. I've cut it off the reel and have a decent length left. Say if you cut it off earlier and you've ended up, you can tell you're not going to have enough wire to make the whole bail. What you can always just do is finish off this wire completely and just start wrapping with a new one. That's completely fine as well. If I can, I prefer to use the same one throughout. So what I'm going to do is, the wire that I've got here, just choose your longest one. I'm going to continue wrapping with that. So go around this right one twice, because what I'm going to be doing is a figure-of-8 weave to fill in this space for the bail basically. So the first one is going to be the fiddliest one because you can see the wires are still loose. And what we need to do now, we're coming down in between the two wires, the base wires, cross over to the other side, and then wrap around that. It's going to be the trickiest one. You just have to keep hold of the whole thing while you're tightening this. Press it all the way down so it stays in the shape that you want it to, just like this. And again, wrap around twice around that side. So it's the figure-of-8 weave, and I'm wrapping around twice every time I go around a base wire. So down through the middle again, make sure your wraps are nice and tight. Cross over to the opposite side, wrap around this one twice. Once, down through the middle, make it twice, cross over to the other side, and then again, wrap around once, push down, and again twice, and push down nice and tight. And then you'll slowly start to see that you're filling in this whole space with your weave. And then, because you can obviously make your bail different, but it's just the shape that I like them to be in, this graduating outwards, you'll find it gives a really nice feature. So just keep filling this up, and I'm going to keep doing this until I reach the point that's going to be the very top of my bail, so the widest point, because then I'm going to start graduating inwards again, and I'm going to show you how I do that. So I've now reached the point that I want to be the top of my bail, so the widest point. So what I'm going to do to graduate back inwards again is I just need to take my chain nose pliers and then grab one side at a time. Make sure your weave is pushed all the way down so it's nice and tight, and then just gently bend it inward towards the middle. So give it a nice angle, so roughly the same as the other side of it there. Same thing on the opposite side. Grab it right where the weave ends and bend it inward. So like this, and you can always adjust it. And then you can just open up the top here to make it a little bit easier to weave, to get in between there. And then you just want to continue weaving. Now when you're graduating inwards, it's a little bit different than when you're just weaving regularly, either graduating outwards or not graduating at all. And what I found to be the best thing is, because what your wire will naturally want to do as you're wrapping, go down in between like usual, is whenever you're pulling your wraps tight, the wire will naturally want to kind of slide towards a narrower point like that. So obviously we want to avoid that, because that's going to give not a very nice and neat finish. So to avoid that, when I go over to the other side to wrap that side, I want to basically use my fingers on nails to hold down the side that I just wrapped. So just like that. So it can be a little bit fiddly, it's a little bit more tricky wrapping something that graduates inwards, but it is doable. And again, nice and tight like that. And just always push that down, go to the opposite side again. And as I'm doing that, I'm holding down the side that I just wrapped while I'm wrapping the other one. So just like this. And that's really the best way that I found to try and get an even and neat look as well when you're wrapping something that graduates inwards. You just want to keep doing this till you get roughly the same length on this side of the midpoint as you have on this side, because then what we need to do after that is shape the bail. So I've now finished wrapping the bail completely to the length that I want it to be. Obviously the length of it's going to decide what size it is ultimately. So now what we need to do is bend it into the shape that we want as well. So what you can do is get any form of mandrel or anything. You can take a pencil, whatever you have really, just something to help create the shape. I'm just going to put that behind it. Remember to bend it towards the direction of the back of it, so where you have the other tails as well from your base wire. So just put this behind it a bit below the center point and then start bending it back. Now this pencil is a bit too large for what I want my bail, so I'm just going to get the curve in place and then just so I have a nice curve at the top there, and then press the rest of it together. So where your weave ends meets up with basically where you started out making the bail. So that's what we want to do there. So once it's shaped nicely, what we need to do is secure it in place. So I'm going to use the wire that I've been making the bail with for that as well. So you can just get the other one out of the way here. So all I'm going to do, because we obviously want this to still kind of blend in, so just try and look, just pretend that these wires aren't there for now. What we're working with is just these two still that we made the bail with. I'm going to take this tail that's also from the bail, and I'm going to basically, it's coming down in between the two wires now. I'm going to go down in between the whole piece. So just straight up to the other side, just like that. And then on the back here, I'm just going to have a look, and then what I want to do is come around to the other side. So just have a look and try and pull it tight there, right at the bottom of the bail. Pull it tight so it blends in nicely. Bring it back to the back again, and then I'm just going to bring it around the one leg that I'm running into first. So now come up in between the two, and then wrap around that one extra time to fasten it nicely. Just again make it as nice and tight as possible, because this, what you're doing now, is then going to just blend in with the weave that you've already done, so it's not going to stand out or anything. We need to do the same on the other side. So I'm going to cross over to the other side, so over the other leg, still go up in between. So I'm coming up on the other side, and then here again just pull it around the front and just pull it quite tight if you can. You can always use pliers to help get more tension in there, so it blends in nicely. And back to the back again, and then wrap it around the first leg you meet on this side. So you've used both legs from the bail, the base wires rather, so that both sides are nice and secure, because you want obviously your piece to be nice and secure and durable. So like that, just make sure everything is blended in nicely and it's nice and tight. Like I said, sometimes pulling and grabbing with your pliers can give a better effect, because you can grab hold much better than you can with your fingers and your hands. Wrap around the same leg an extra time. There we go. Just to make sure that it's nice and secure. So there we now have the bail in place. It's not going to move anywhere, it's nice and secure in place. So what that's left now is basically to sort out all these legs of the base wires. Now the possibilities for what you can do with these are really endless, so I'm just going to show you what I'm going to do with this one. So what I think is going to give a nice neat finish as well, and make it look nice on the back, because remember, if this is a pendant, it's going to move around as you're wearing it. So you want the back to look nice as well. So we can just keep using the tails that we have left, if you have enough. That is, this one might be a bit too short for what I want to do, but you can always, like I said, add in new, and we will have to add in new weaving wire to some of these legs anyway. But I'm just going to start with the one that I already have, might as well use that. I'm going to bring that around also to the back here, and then what I'm going to do is basically start working with one of these legs at a time. And what I'm going to do is just basically coil all the way down, and then I want the ends of these wires to be attached to the frame as well, just to make it nice and secure. Now it should hold plenty with the frame that we've already made because it lies right behind of your cabochon, so that is enough. But if you want the extra security, you can use these legs for that as well. That's what I'm going to be doing. So all I'm going to do is choose one leg for this and just start coiling around it. So just make sure you put up every time you wrap around your wire, put it up against the previous one so it becomes nice and tight. And then now what I'm going to do with these is just basically have one wire reach one prong, because then I'm going to attach them through one of those prongs as well, because we just have still a little bit of space. But I'm going to continue with this wire on that leg. Then we also want to add some more weaving wire to the other legs. So like I said, I'm going to work with one wire at a time, but you might just want to have a look as well, because you can obviously see the two wires coming from the bail. They're kind of lying on top of the other ones, so if you finish these ones off first, it can be a little bit difficult to get to those. So before I do these ones completely, I want to just do the other ones because they're kind of the bottom layer, just so I've got more space to get in there. So I want to attach a new length on my 0.4mm wire. I've just cut a decent length, whatever you feel comfortable working with, or you can leave it on the reel. And then start attaching this to one of the other legs that you have left with a 0.8mm, and just put it all the way up against there, and all you want to do is start coiling the exact same way all the way until you reach the length that you want it to be. Now these back ones I'm going to have coming down towards the bottom prongs. The top two, that are also the shorter ones, I'm going to have towards the top two prongs there. So I'm just going to keep coiling this all the way till I reach down here, and then I'm going to show you how I finish off the wires. So I've now kept coiling all the way down that leg, and I'll just gently start shaping it into the position I want it to sit as well, because then now I've reached the very point where the end of my coils meet up with the prong. So what I want to do is here attach it as well, and also get my wire in position so I can finish it off. So what I'm going to just do first is get some round nose pliers out and just start getting this shape in place. So I'm just going to put my pliers in to help make my shape around. I'm just going to basically end my wire with a bit of a swirl or a circle there. Just doing this is going to help get it nice and neat. So just in place, just for now. And then this 0.4mm wire, I have, like I said, the last coil is right where it meets the prong, and like I said as well, you have that little tiny space still in the prong, so I'm going to use that to attach it. So it's coming from below, in this case, below the base wire, so I'm going to bring it outside, around the prong, and then up in between. You might have to go the other way around, so come down in between the prong, that's fine. Whichever you have to do, and then just bring it up. Make sure that the wire sits ideally kind of just as nice and blended in as possible, so when you look from the front here and then from the side, you won't really be able to see it much unless you look really closely. So I've got that there now, so I'm just going to do this just the once, that's fine, and then go back to continue wrapping and coiling around this wire to be able to finish it off. So you just continue then. Let's have a look where your wire is coming from. I'm going to go up through the circle there to make it kind of seamless. And then over you can see as well, make sure you pull it nice and tight so it sits right against the framework so it's not sticking out too much. And then you just want to continue coiling here. I'm just going to keep going up in between building those coils, wraps, all the way around the circle there. This is how I like to finish it off. Like I said, you can do whatever you want, all the way till basically it meets up where it runs across the other coils that I've already made, because then I'm going to cut off the base wire. So I'll coil some more until it now reaches the point where it said where the wire crosses over the previous coil that it runs into. So the same wire, but it just crosses over itself. So what I want to do first is then get rid of this 0.4mm wire. So I'll get in my case I just use my flush cutters, and I get nice right in there to be able to tuck away the very end, because when you cut it off you're going to have a little sharp end of the wire left. So I'll get my chain nose pliers then, just to squeeze the end in. And I like to kind of get hold of it and then roll my pliers in the direction that the wire is going, just so you won't be able to feel any ends. So feel it, if you can still feel it, you need to just tuck it in a bit more. Then that's finished off. So now I need to finish off the 0.8mm. So what I'm going to do is just cut this off right before it meets or crosses over the previous coil basically. So basically right where my coiling on this side finishes completely. So I'm cutting that off, and then all I'm going to do is squeeze down this end. So the very end of my 0.8mm basically just goes straight up against itself, just like that. So the end is not going to be free so it can catch or scratch on anything. And then that's how I'm going to finish off all the wires. So that one is now finished off, and it's nice and secure, and also looks nice compared to how the design on the back is going to look. So all you need to do now is basically this for every single leg that you have. So you can continue with the other lower level ones, finish off the long one first to the bottom, and then do the other two, just attaching your wire whenever you need to. So you just want to finish off all the legs in the same way, and then all there's left to do after that is really just sort out the prongs. So I've now finished off all the 0.8mm wires on the back here, as you can see, connected them to the prongs. So this whole piece now is nice and secure, and it adds a bit extra stability, and it's also nice and neat there. You can obviously do whatever design you want. So all that's left to do now is sort out the prongs and add the stone as well to the setting. So what we need to do first is get these prongs in the right place. So I'm going to take my chain nose pliers for this, it gives a bit more control, and start with one at a time, and we need to then bend them so they point upwards. So like that, keep hold of your whole frame and just do one prong at a time and have them start them to bend upwards like that. And you can just do a bit at a time, because you can always go back and adjust some more. So take one at a time all the way around here. I have to do this one that way, like that. And then you can always refer back to your cabochon as well, just put it in, see how it looks and see how they fit. So I've got space around all the prongs there, so I can continue bending them up a bit more, getting them a bit tighter. So now I'm getting them pretty much to go straight up. Like I said, just do a bit at a time. You can always go back again. And rather take your time and adjust it as you go than maybe over bend them and then it's not quite right. So they're now all sticking straight up pretty much. So again, let's put the cabochon back in, see how that looks. So it's definitely a lot tighter now around. So all the prongs are almost flush against the cabochons on the side there. So you just basically want to keep maneuvering this. You can do it getting just a bit tighter, but then that's where we need to start bending the tips in as well, because that's what's going to hold from the front of the cabochon. Because obviously, if I put this in now, you can see it kind of holds in place there. But if I were to tip it upside down, it's going to fall out, as you can see, because we have nothing from the front holding it just yet. So just like that. So what we need to do with that is from each prong there, we're going to just go to the very tip. So that's why I also like to use my chain nose pliers. So just basically the space right at the tip of your prong to begin with, and just gently bend that inwards a bit. Again, just a bit at a time rather than too much, because we can always go back and bend it more. Just gently bend them inwards, because then these are what's going to go just within the sides of the cabochon and hold it in place. So like that. Let's see how it looks. And I'm probably going to have to kind of force this in now. Snap it in like that, and then it's almost there. Still a bit loose, so there's a bit of manoeuvring left to do as well still. So you just want to keep doing that. So again, I'm just going to go back to the tips because that's what I want to just capture more. You can go to the bottom or the tips and just gently bend them in a little bit more. Just a tiny bit at a time. It's all small movements. So just when you hit the right spot on each of them, it'll capture it just right. So just gently go all the way around again. And now let's try it again. So this is just manoeuvring basically until they're in place. I'm just going to snap it in like that. And then make sure it's sitting correctly, positioned in place. And then basically this is held in now because you can see the tips of the prongs are just gently folding in over the edge of the cabochon. And that's exactly what we want, because that's what's going to capture it in place. And now you can do the prongs longer or shorter depending on the thickness of the cabochon, like I mentioned earlier. But also, this is quite, they only just go over the edge, which I kind of like because it makes it a lot less, a lot more seamless really. It's not so obvious that you have something there to capture the cabochon. But if you want to, if you feel a bit not so secure with that, you can always make them a bit longer and it'll just come in just slightly more. I'm just going to take it out again just for the last manoeuvres, the prongs, so it's completely tight and how I want it to be. And that should be fine. Snap it back in place. I find that that works best snapping it, because then the wires kind of snap back into where you placed them, the prongs. But you can also say use something now, like the back of your pliers, something that's quite soft to help push the prongs against the stone. You don't want to, I wouldn't recommend using, say, the actual pliers to push, because you can end up scraping the wire itself and maybe also even the stone. So I'd recommend using something like the back of your pliers. Push against it if you want to do that as well. So it's completely up to you. Just anything to really get the stone in there nice and securely. And then once it is, you obviously test it. It's not going to come out at all now. It's in there nice and securely. So this is basically done. We have a cabochon nicely set into the prongs, and it's holding it nice and securely with the bail, so it's completely usable, and the extra security on the back as well. Like I said, you can do whatever design you want. So this is basically how you do this, and it'll work for really many different shapes and sizes of cabochons as well. This is just to demonstrate with. So that's how you do a prong set cabochon. Quite simple and easy, just when you get the technique right. And you don't have to do a whole lot of maths for it, in my opinion. Just do basic things. So I really hope you enjoyed this tutorial and found it useful. And thank you very much for watching. Hello everyone. Today I'm going to show you how to make these Egyptian style wirework earrings. And they look like this. So this is kind of hanging from the front. They would look like this. And they dangle nicely from the ear. So kind of like hoop earrings. So this is the effect that you get all the way around your earrings there in a set. And it's kind of to match the bracelet that I already made. I made this a while back and I got quite a few requests to make earrings to match.